Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is McKenna. Today I'm going to refilm a video that I already filmed once. So the first time I filmed this video, I was up in my studio and I was alone and I had my backdrop, the camera was set up, and then somehow I lost my footage. It got corrupt or it just wouldn't open. So here we are, filming it in my basement while Shane games over there. You can kind of see him, but my camera won't really focus. But that's okay because I just want to get the message out there and I don't have time to film it in the manner that I did before. So this is going to be a few things that deaf people want normal hearing people to know. This is my credibility right here. I have a thing screwed into my skull, so I'd say I'm pretty deaf. I rely on this to hear. I am completely deaf without it. So don't come for me just because my speech sounds fairly typical. But alright, so the first thing is that being deaf doesn't mean that you can't hear at all, at least in my case. So quick lesson on the anatomy of an ear. You have your outer ear, which is this part, you have your middle ear, which is where your eardrum and all the little bones are, and then you have your inner ear, and that's where the nerves are that turn the vibrations into actual sounds for your brain, if that makes sense. So my middle ear is what's damaged, and that's why I can't hear. Now, that being said, you can bypass the middle ear in different ways, right? So if I were to turn this off and put my phone to my tooth or something that can vibrate all the way to my inner ear, I would be able to hear it, just not in the same way. So whenever I'm talking to my boyfriend at night, when I take this off, if we'll put our foreheads together and I can hear him enough, I can feel the vibrations enough to normally make out what he's saying. It's a lot like Charlie Brown, all the adults in Charlie Brown, the teacher and the parents are just kind of like the wah wah wah, you can't understand it, but you can hear it. Yeah. Some deaf people, like me, whose deafness is caused because their middle ear is damaged, can still hear some noise. Number 2, it takes a lot of effort for a deaf person to interact and function in a hearing world. I think that people take for granted the fact that, the world's designed for hearing people. Same for any disability. The world's designed for able-bodied, healthy, perfect humans, right? So people like me who cannot hear normally, it's just exhausting. We have to try to present ourselves as a typical normal person, to blend in, to act normal in society. It's exhausting. Also, another thing to think about for hearing specifically, it's very, very, very easy to be overstimulated. I was deaf for a decade before I got this hearing aid. Prior to that, all I did was read lips. So overstimulation, definitely a thing. I just get exhausted because my brain is having to process all of these noises and sounds that I didn't hear for a very, very, very long time. Also, just throwing in a quick not so fun fact here, deaf people are twice as likely to suffer from anxiety and depression, and that absolutely makes sense to me. I definitely suffer from anxiety, and I would definitely dedicate a lot of the stems of my anxiety to my hearing loss. It just goes back to trying to fit in and the constant guessing game of what people are saying if you're reading lips, just being complicated, right? I can't just blend in and be simple in most situations. People have to accommodate me, and then I worry about that, and then it spirals. Next thing. I lost my place. This one should go without saying, but being able to see someone speak is helpful and in some cases necessary. Even for people who can't read lips fluently, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but even someone who can't read lips, it could still help someone hear by showing when the starts and ends of words are, if that makes sense. Because for me, for example, I don't necessarily need to read lips anymore. My Baha amplifies the sound enough for me to hear, but my brain struggles with comprehending what I'm hearing because we didn't have to process that for so long. So now that I do, still being able to look at someone's mouth when they talk is helpful, so I know when are they taking a pause, where are the breaks between the words, so then I can translate that into what I'm hearing, and it helps me a lot. So another thing to keep in mind is that communication in the dark, pretty much impossible if you're deaf. Even me now with my Baha, it's really hard for me to communicate if I cannot see someone's mouth. Editing this, just cutting it down real quick, and I'm cutting in because I realized I left out something really important. It's not just about being able to see someone to read their lips. That is, of course, a very big part, especially for me when I was relying on reading lips. But it's also really important because we cannot hear tone of voice or sarcasm or anger or any emotion in your words. So we rely on seeing your facial expressions, the way you talk, the speed you're talking, which I guess normal people can hear that, but we can't. So it's all relying on how fast it's coming out. Your body language in general is how a deaf person is finding those cues and hints to figure out like your tone of voice and how you're saying something, because we can say the same sentence and mean 10 different things just by our tones. Deaf people miss out on all of that. It's also important to note that not everyone can read lips. Just because someone's deaf does not mean that they're going to be able to read lips. I was lucky in that aspect. I lost my hearing at a young age and I lost it gradually. So that gave me the ability to, kind of pick up on it naturally. And on top of that, even though I can read lips for like all the people I see on a daily basis, and most situations I can read people's lips enough to get through a conversation. However, everybody talks different. Everyone pronounces their words differently. There's different accents. There's mustaches and beards and facial hair that get in the way. There's all sorts of, there's facial paralysis, where if someone has like Bell's palsy, for example, I'm only this half of their mouth isn't gonna move, so I'm only, there's so many different circumstances. Reading lips is not always reliable and not everyone can. Kind of going off that and like another form of communication, sign language is not universal and not everyone uses it. This won't stay focused, but come on. I am right here. Focus on me, please. Okay, sign language, not universal. I know very, very little sign language, and I have been deaf since I've been losing my hearing quickly since 4th grade, but I've been pretty much deaf since high school. And I know my ABCs, but that's about it. I can say more cookie. Does that count? That's toddlers know that. If people choose to learn sign language, great, wonderful, props to them. I didn't for my own personal reasons, and maybe I could do a whole separate video on that. But just keep in mind, don't automatically assume that just because someone's deaf or hard of hearing or any of those things that they automatically know sign language, because I get that on a very, very, very regular basis. And I definitely cannot use sign language as a form of communication, unless we're going to spell everything out, which that would take 10 years. Another thing to note, at least in my case, I have only ever had a bone-anchored hearing aid. I've never had a traditional hearing aid or a traditional cochlear. They don't work for me. But in my case, hearing aids don't make the sound any clearer. So they make it louder, but they don't make it clearer, and it all kind of blends together because my brain, like I talked about earlier, is not used to comprehending sound. So if I ask you to repeat yourself, right? Speaking louder isn't going to help. That's not what I'm asking you. If I'm asking you to repeat something, I heard you, I just didn't comprehend you. Unless I specifically say, hey, will you say that again a little louder? And I'll do that. We're gonna ask for what we need. I hope everyone does that. But what we need when we're asking you to repeat yourself is probably to enunciate more clearly, or to leave a bigger gap between the words so things don't blend together as much. Definitely just speak more distinctly, if that makes sense. We don't need you to yell at us. If I don't have my Baha on, I probably need you to yell at me, but yeah, those are just a few things that deaf people want hearing people to know, from my perspective at least. And let me know if you want to hear a whole separate video as to why I never learned sign language, even though I've been going deaf since 4th grade. I'll see you in the next video.